Now, am I saying this because I was personally apprehended by Customs and Border Patrol in Mexico and forced to pay a tax of whatever dollar value that they assigned? No, that's not the reason why I'm saying.
Very late to this trend, aren't I? In preparation for the very important presidential election that is going to be coming up soon. No, not that one. I'm talking about the other one. Unfortunately, this is not going to be my continuation
Mexico mention
of the Mr. Beat ripoff series that I did. This is instead going to be me simply giving a refresher of the Mexican political landscape for those who might not know. I find Mexican political culture to be very interesting, as much like the nation itself, it is really...
I heard a Mexican lady on NPR unironically be asked a question about femicide, which is a massive problem in Mexico. Okay. And she said, a man couldn't handle this. How can a woman? Like an old Mexican lady. I was like, God damn. Straight up, or just like every part of this conversation is so stupid too, because like the only boundaries that they're having this conversation on is literally like, oh, it's a woman now and that's woke. Like virtually zero mentions of their political positions, what their platforms are, whether or not they're going to actually follow through on said platforms. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, well, Mexico's about to have a woman in charge.
Really close to what many in the Western world have, but has a lot of differences that sets it apart and makes it unique. Let's compare it to my patria, the USA. It has a president, it has a two-chamber legislature, it has a Supreme Court, and a federalist type of governance. However, unlike the United States, there is no electoral college, they have some element of proportional representation, presidents and governors are limited to a one-term limit, and the United States has 2 viable political parties, while Mexico has 7. However, despite the fact that Mexico has 7 political parties, there are still rather similar lines in how the parties are and how the Mexican political landscape is comparatively to the United States. One of the biggest elements seems to be most of politics is essentially defined as, are you for or against the guy in charge?
Not just any woman, but a Zionist woman president. Is she a Zionist? Or are people saying that because she's Jewish? I have not heard her position on Israel at all. I don't know if she's a Zionist. She is Jewish, though. And I think a lot of people automatically are like, oh, how suspicious. She's also not great in general, but not for the fucking reasons that you think, as far as I understand.
To the point where one of the parties literally based their entire identity on that aspect.
Considering that she is, as far as I understand, basically AMLO, there's no way she's going to deviate from AMLO's position on Israel, which is pretty fucking critical of Israel in general. And I think the only reason why people are saying she's a Zionist is because she's Jewish. That's all I'm saying. You can criticize her for being AMLO but a woman, okay? But I don't think that's a valid fucking take.
Which we'll get to in a bit. But this also gets a little bit complicated because the divides between the parties are not necessarily partisan or ideological as they are in most Western nations. It can be based on a multitude of factors, which we'll again get into in a bit. I guess I should avoid dilly-dallying and just actually get into the political parties in Mexico. The first party we'll discuss is the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or Partido Revolucionario Institucional, or the PRI. Founded in the year 1929 by Mexican President Plutarco Elias Calles. Calles was the leader of a liberal faction in the Mexican Revolution and was elected under the Social Democratic Laborist Party to succeed his fellow general Álvaro Obregón. However, the two were shifting rightward during their tenures and seemingly were heading down a path of authoritarianism and autocracy, which was very odd considering that was literally what was just gotten rid of after the revolution via Porfirio Diaz. Calles, through his harsh persecution of the Catholics during the Cristero War, and Obregón for attempting to break the just instituted one-term precedent. Both of these factors would end up leading to Obregón's assassination before he could take his second term. Calles, seeing all of these issues in the immediate post-war, was afraid of Mexico falling deeper into a civil conflict, so he attempted to break all of the partisan divides by abolishing every single political party in Mexico and reforming them under one party, essentially trying to make it the State Party of Mexico, a title that it would maintain for 72 uninterrupted years. During this time, it had various ideological shifts, starting out as a very authoritarian autocratic party without really any semblance of a political ideology. Then, as a backlash to Calles, their next president, Lázaro Cárdenas, shifted the party vastly to the left. Then, when people inevitably had a backlash against him, the party would shift rightward again, at best being classified as social democratic, but at worst being classified as neoliberal, a shift that they kept maintaining with every succeeding president, to the point where now it is considered the de facto party of the Mexican center. While not explicitly right-wing, they are basically just capitalist neoliberals. Think the Democratic Party's right-wing if it were its own political party. The PRI's longest-standing rival is the National Action Party, or Partido Acción Nacional, or the PAN, a conservative Catholic party formed in opposition to Lázaro Cárdenas's socialistic and atheistic agenda. However, as the PRI started to change, so too did the PAN. Not really policy-wise, but more in rhetoric. They mostly changed their message as the party opposing the PRI and supporting democracy, usually downplaying its more explicit conservative elements, attempting to get people who oppose the PRI to back them, regardless of their political outlook. Such as the case in the 2000 election, where they had managed to get socialists to back them by promising that they would not privatize Mexico's petroleum industry, even though that was one of their primary policies since the party's foundation. By the way, they still supported that policy. They just didn't tell them that they supported that policy, which inevitably led to their candidate ending up winning in the 2000 election. But then came the big problem. When you build your entire party as the opposition party and running on things you oppose rather than what you're for, when you inevitably have to make it known what you stand for and what you're going to do as the mainstream party, you're gonna turn off some people. And turn off people they did, because after electing 2 presidents, people were so turned off from the PAN that in the following election, their candidate ended up getting 3rd, and when one of the former first ladies actively sought the PAN's nomination, they refused to have her as the candidate. Now, if you know anything about Western democracies, you know one thing: when there's a party that represents a broad coalition of the center-right voters, there must also come a broad party that represents center-left voters. Now, what's interesting is that these voters have actually gotten to change the party that represents them. Originally, the party that represented the Mexican left was the Party of the Democratic Revolution, or Partido de la Revolución Democrática, or the PRD. The party was founded by a man by the name of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, son of Lázaro Cárdenas, who was angry at the rightward shift that his father's party was going in and decided to push for a new left-wing force in Mexico. And he nearly won on his first try, but the controversial results of the 1988 election made it so that it was not meant to be. But he was hoping that the massive blowback after that election and the ensuing administration would propel him straight to the presidential palace. Then came the rise of the left-wing guerrilla movement to the Zapatistas and the assassination of the PRI's presidential candidate, which made people very distrustworthy of leftward candidates. And unfortunately, party struggles started to
Yeah, they were fucking untrustworthy of left-wing candidates because they were like, they're actually super sick. They're too cool, is what people thought. Seems like the issue that people had were that seems like the issue that they had was that they were too cool.
Form, with one faction of the party being extremely loyal to Cuauhtémoc, while many other factions were trying to make it so that they could move past him for upcoming elections. And things got worse as some of the party heads started becoming cozy to the other two parties in the mainstream Mexican political discourse, eventually culminating in the PRD signing a bill that would allow the privatization of Pemex, Mexico's state-run petroleum industry, which would culminate in a huge faction of the party to leave and form a new political party. And not that long afterwards, Cuauhtemoc would end up leaving the party as well, which would then turn the party into an empty vacuum, which basically represents the interests of a bunch of really old members of the Mexican left who are nostalgic for Cuauhtemoc Cárdenas, but not too nostalgic to not want to cozy up to the rest of the Mexican political elite. The party that would end up taking its place as the torchbearer of the Mexican left would be the National Regeneration Movement, or Movimiento Regeneración Nacional, or Morena. This party was founded by two-time PRD presidential candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador in 2014 in order to translate a youth-based political movement in Mexico into a new political party, viewing the PRD negatively for voting with the PRI in the pan to deregulate Pemex. Despite this, Morena doesn't necessarily stray too far from the PRD ideologically. The party is essentially being made up by the people who were the left wing of the PRD. The biggest difference from Morena and the PRD is the fact that Morena...
AMLO, you'll never make me hate you, okay? When he came out with the fucking truth of duendas, did I say it right? When no one else would. I'm sorry. It was over for me, okay? Duendes, not duendas. Duendes! Mi cabrón. That's right. He knows the truth, bro. He knows the fucking truth. He knows the truth. A lot of you don't. And a lot of you are afraid of a little quirked up, religious boy who is talking about wood elves, okay? And UFOs. How many UFO investigations occurred under AMLO's watch? Who else would do that for you? AMLO was weirdly socially conservative, Pepe hands. No, I know. Oh, I know. They're going to get you if you keep saying it. Wait, what? No, they're not going to get me because I believe them. AMLO's an interesting person because on the one hand, he's like definitely a fucking weirdo and very socially conservative on a lot of issues. But also on the other hand, I always hear stuff about like nationalization of natural resources and things of that nature, even though simultaneously it does seem like he was like supposed to be the anti-corruption candidate, and yet under his watch it almost feels like the military got more beefed up but still didn't do enough to fucking deal with the cartels, and the police and the federales got more corrupt than they were prior, and and pretty much everything he touched, with the exception of like more protectionist attitudes. I mean, he went along with Donald Trump and Joe Biden's immigration agenda, and things didn't change for the better. Now, am I saying this because I was personally apprehended by Customs and Border Patrol in Mexico and forced to pay a tax of whatever dollar value that they assigned? No, that's not the reason why I'm saying that. There isn't a candidate in Mexico that is anti-corruption. Well, mate, I love you, but you've got a pretty flawed understanding of Mexican internal politics. As a Mexican, I'm saying this. Why? Because I said the duendes thing? Is that why? Hasan crybaby? Wait, what? Duendes are so scary. Don't talk about them. Stop. They will attack. Hasan crybaby. I think that given yes, that chatter is right. Your Mexico politics info is wrong. Sorry, man. Yeah, no, I think that the reason he does great shit, Hasan. I don't know if you hang out with some Mexican American pro West weirdos. No. Okay. I'm not done coming to you. Okay. As far as I understand, This is the reason why I brought up protectionist politics that AMLO has. However, having said that, a lot of people fucking personally think he is like legitimately like a ride or die socialist or some shit. For this reason, I think that's why there's a lot of people who perceive him as like the anti-Western imperialist choice or something.
Is way more open with the idea of being closer to socialists, due to the fact that AMLO not only has a decent history of radical political activism, combined with the fact that he has aligned himself with many of the pink tide leaders. Even
this stuff is good, like all day, every day, and I will openly recognize that.
The ones that a lot of social democrats would consider a little too far. However, despite the fact that of what is considered the mainstream of Mexican politics, they would be considered the most radical, the message seems to be resonating really well, as not only did he win by a large margin in the most recent presidential election, Morena has also quickly become the new big political force in Mexico, which puts him in the exact same position that the PAN found themselves in before. When the people who run as outsiders become insiders, what happens next?
HasanAbi gets his Mexico information from American news and papers, like getting your point of view of Palestine from U.S. media. How is Maduro too far? Just the corruption stuff? His actual policies are pretty mid. Maduro is the #1 villain in American politics for as long as people pay attention to Venezuela.
That is yet to be determined. However, despite the fact that most of Mexican political history for a long...
When people talk about Maduro, they're not actually fucking talking about like currency mismanagement or repression, like political repression. They think he's like out there fucking slaughtering every business owner that has more than $10 in their pocket for sport. Like whatever the fucking incredibly right-wing Venezuelan like agricultural producer and fucking grocery chain owning billionaires in Venezuela that own all the fucking media out there that isn't state media, whatever the fuck they say to the Americans, it goes. This doesn't mean that he's great. He's certainly no Chavez, and he's not great in general, but like I think he's been portrayed as the perfect villain.
Time has been focused on these 4 political parties. Mexico also has 3 more political parties that, while not as prominent as these guys, still hold a very decent amount of power. And to begin this section, we will talk about the Ecologist Green Party of Mexico, or Partido Verde Ecologista de Mexico, or PVEM. As the name implies, this is the Mexican Green Party. However, unlike most green parties around the world that are usually placed on the left side of the political spectrum, PVEM, for a long period of time, has been placed ideologically on the right side of the political spectrum.
Before anyone goes to the comments, I am fully aware if you look up PVEM nowadays the party is described as center-left, but you will see in this section why I do not believe that that political label is genuine for them.
Being considered a green conservative political party. One of the most notable things to show its contrast with other green parties was the fact that in 2008, they were the leading force in Mexico to try and reintroduce the death penalty, which made many international Greens sever their relationship.
That's pretty funny. Dude, that's awesome. That's such a funny fucking... That is such a funny policy for a Green Party to advocate for. That's awesome. I'm sorry. That's hilarious. Dude, what the fuck? Imagine Jill Stein in America being like, listen, guys, I care about the environment a lot. Okay? Which is why we have to execute prisoners. Okay? Their farts are causing too many emissions. Our prison industrial complex is it's taking up too much space. I am pro-labor, I'm pro-left, I'm pro-reducing carbon emissions, and that is why we have to kill everyone.
With PVEM. However, if you thought my description of the PRD as an empty vessel was a little bit lax, well, I would have to argue that the PVEM party is way more of an empty vessel than the rest of the parties, with them facing many accusations that they are not really a legitimate party in any sense of the word. For starters, I should mention this. Given the fact that their name has ecologist in it, you would think that the party is very environmentally conscious. Well, in a 2000 interview with the party's leader, Jorge Gonzalez Martinez, he was asked how serious he was about environmentalism, to which he responded with, "To me, ecology is the least important thing to me. I represent interests." Very odd thing for what is allegedly the environmentalist party in Mexico to say, right? I should also mention the fact that the party's leader is the son of the party's founder, which has led to many accusations that the party is just a tight-knit group of friends and family to form a small political cult in the country. But the biggest thing to show how empty of a vessel that PVEM actually is the fact that PVEM, in order to remain politically relevant, has essentially formed a symbiotic relationship with whatever party is in charge at the time. During the early years of the party's existence, the PRI was the party in charge, so they aligned with the PRI. Then when the PAN was in charge, they aligned with the PAN. And now that Morena is in charge, they are aligned with Morena. And if I were to hedge my bets, I would say that no matter what party is in charge, they're going to endorse and back and form a coalition with them. Don't believe me? Well, come back to this video in like 10 years and see which party they're in alliance with. Speaking of alliances, there is one more political party that makes a big use of political alliances to stay afloat, being the Labor Party, or Partido del Trabajo, or PT.
Mexico's such a weird place. Cartel has so much power over everyday lives, and people in my family, for example, are either pro-cartel or pro-capital punishment for all cartel members. They don't consider economic reforms to change the tide all that often. I mean, that makes sense. It's the elephant in the room. It's understandable to have the major problem not get addressed for so many years in either direction, no matter what your opinion is. And then all of the economic reforms, one, take too long to implement, and two, oftentimes don't get implemented at all.
Mexico's openly socialist political party, the party of people who thought the Cardenas family was too moderate. PVEM and PT have a lot of very odd parallels. They were both founded around the same time, they mostly focus on electoral alliances, and they represent a tight-knit niche in Mexican politics. The main difference being that PT is more consistent in using this to spread their left-wing message. After losing their first solo candidate, they have consistently endorsed the mainstream left-wing option in the election, leading to it basically being almost as if it were a satellite party, with them very rarely going in opposition to whoever is the mainstream left-wing option. In fact, a state that showed this well was the state of Zacatecas, where a prominent left-wing political family in the area were PRD diehards before leaving to join PT and build them up, before becoming lead figureheads in the formation of Morena. So despite the fact that this party is probably the least successful of all the parties in this video, it actually has a lot more staying power than its vote returns would actually indicate. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Citizens Movement, or Movimiento Ciudadano, or MC. Or if you're a Mexican who is watching this video, you may know them as Movimiento Naranja, el futuro está en tus manos, Movimiento Naranja, Movimiento Ciudadano. This is a party that has gone through a lot of changes, but also hasn't. The Citizens Movement was founded in 1999 by a group of young left-leaning PRI members who wanted to change the course within Mexican politics in the new millennia. A new course for the country, as they said. Why make a new political party as opposed to joining the PRD, you may ask? Well, they viewed the PRD's brand of leftism as becoming an old guard, as well as not meeting the needs of the next generation, particularly in regards to social issues like feminism. The party also identifies itself as social democratic and broadly center-left, but it's a little bit different from the other parties that you might consider center-left in Mexico. Not explicitly opposing capitalism, but arguing it should be fairer, which in the most recent Mexican presidential election has essentially led to them becoming a third force in Mexico, kind of becoming the de facto center, rather than joining with one coalition and trying to be 100% pro-AMLO, or joining the other coalition and being 100% anti-AMLO. They've decided to work with him issue by issue, particularly on things regarding, again, feminism, or LGBTQ rights, or marijuana, but opposing him on certain other issues, which has led to many people to actually take a look at this party more seriously than the rest of them, as they have made a point to refuse joining an alliance or friendship with the Mexican political elite, leading to the MC to become very prominent in Mexico yet. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say on this topic. Maybe check in the future to see if I have a video on the upcoming Mexican presidential election. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify a future video.
Okay, I feel like the fact is that the PRI was not created to be a democratic political party that competes every 6 years at the polls, but try to legitimize the dictatorship of the Mexican Revolution by simulating a supposed democracy. It was conceived as a communist party of the Soviet Union to have a symbiotic relationship with the party state. The difference is that the general secretary of the CPSU was consequently head of state in Mexico. The president emanated from the PRI, was the owner of the party for 6 years, which gave him meta-constitutional power to personally appoint the successor. Yeah, but the point is that's not supposed to happen. Like, ultimately, what's supposed to happen is it just stays loyal to the immortal science of Marxist-Leninism, and this gives you broad powers of making, you know, multiple decade-long agendas and following through on them, and not have the fucking party's ideological perspective shift to diametrical opposites. The advantage of having like one major party filled to the brim with like unique voices and different ideologies is that those ideologies get mentioned, but ultimately you're supposed to have an advantage being that as long as it's directed by the interests of the working class, it should have the capacity to, you know, move the country in the right direction and engage in and not be damaged by short-term profit-seeking motives.